Creative problem solving is a very important topic to me. I myself have struggled with learning and retaining new information, so having the chance to make a video and share some of my strategies for creative problem solving today is super exciting, at least for me. I recently had the chance to speak in Chicago at a motion design event called Half-Res. My presentation there heavily centered around two pillars of my problem-solving pipeline, modular and lateral thinking. Now, modular thinking is just breaking down a big project or a scary task into smaller pieces and just seeing it for its parts. And lateral thinking is just stepping across from a problem and finding an adjacent solution. Now, to demonstrate these two practices, I created this little animated short called the WaffleCake. I utilized the complexity of the project and all the moving pieces to show modular thinking, and anything that I didn't really know how to do or any task that I was unsure of worked in service to demonstrate lateral thinking. That presentation that I gave, it'll be available someday soon, and in that I talk about the softer skills necessary for both of these practices. But due to time constraints of the presentation and being afraid of an angry mob coming after me, I didn't really get into the minutia showing off the technical achievements. So in this video, I'm going to break down the full animation and get into some of the bigger points of interest that I think are kind of cool. We'll talk through some of the hard skills that were necessary to pull off some of the more interesting procedures, and we'll even touch on some of the softer skills necessary for creative problem solving. My name is Elijah Sheffield. I go by Sweet Boy on the internet. I create content to help and teach people to use Blender to create dynamic, beautiful, stylized 3D animation. So if that's of general interest to you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below, let me know what you think. We're going to break this down into much more manageable chapters, to little points of interest. So if at any given point you don't really care what I'm talking about, just go to the next chapter and you might start caring again. I'm going to talk you through 4 points of interest that I think you might glean something from. We'll start with the camera trickery. There's a little bit more going on than what first meets the eye. We'll then go over the waffle to pancake transition, show you how to morph two objects. We'll then go over the bending and the twisting animation. And finally, we'll go over the lighting, which I get pestered about constantly. Now, if you want to pop open the hood and take a look at what I did, if you want to rip assets and use them in your own project, you're more than welcome to. You can download the project files. It'll be linked down below. But if you want a considerable discount off of that, if you want access to exclusive breakdown videos or admittance into the super secret Sweet Boy Society, The Fort, consider joining members only here on YouTube. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at here is the camera trickery. Now, in order to actually pull this off, to pull off this animation, there's a little bit of finessing that goes into this. So I'm going to start by just kind of showing you what's going on in the video editor here, and then we'll go in and we will take a look at how I did it. So if we watch back this animation, you'll see when the pancake flies up into the air, as it comes back down, it is all of a sudden in a waffle iron. But if you look at the 3D space, this is where the pancake actually takes place. The pan for the pancake is over here on the stove, and the waffle iron is down here on the other side of the counter. So what actually has to happen is when it's mid-air, there has to be some kind of a cut to where the waffle iron actually is, whether that's a match cut, whether that's a camera move, whether that's a scene move. I'll show you in just a second, but that is why we have to do this. And if I were to just take the waffle iron and scoot it down while it's up in the air, obviously the waffle iron would be on top of the stove, which would not make a whole lot of sense. I also feel like that's a little bit dangerous. So what we need to do in order to make this work is to either use some kind of a match cut, to use some kind of a camera move, or in this case, actually, it's a whole scene move. Now, to give you a little bit of background, just to the thought process behind this, if I were to move the entire camera, I'll go ahead and turn my camera on right here. As you can see, the only movement with the camera is up and down. And I didn't want to, I could parent it to something else, I guess, but I really didn't want to move it to the left and right because I didn't want it to go across the counter space, because then I would also lose the gobo light, which stays in the exact same place, which is a staple to make it feel very organic, like it's not like the camera isn't moving, which is a large part of this. I wanted it to feel kind of magical. I wanted it to feel a little bit whimsical, and if it's very obvious that the camera is moving from one place to the other, that kind of kills the illusion a little bit. So to keep that intact, I wanted to be sure the gobo stayed in the same place. I wanted to be sure the wall texture was relatively in the same place, but really what was able to cause this trickery of the camera, even though it wasn't really the camera necessarily, what actually aided in the trickery was the line here of the tile being in the exact same place with the waffle iron and with the pan here with the pancake. So the line of tile kind of stays in the exact same place, as well as the gobo, the sunlight coming in through the windows. So those two things were able to kind of keep the brain thinking this is the exact same place. The scene is not shifting, the camera's not shifting. All you see is the whimsy of it becoming a waffle maker when it comes back down. So I can show you exactly how I did this. It's very, very simple. Everything, I think, aside from just like maybe two things that aren't, yeah, the waffle iron and the pan are the only two things that don't move. But as you can see here, I have this little square, this little cube, which is actually our scene controller. And we have like 3 keyframes right here. They're all hold frames. So we start out on frame 24. The scene is shifted to the left where the camera is squared up to the actual stove. And then a few frames later here in frame 69, it shifts back to the right. And now the waffle iron is right there and the whole scene is shifted back. But again, because of the gobo, because of the placement of everything, it doesn't really feel like the camera or the scene is shifted. It feels like a bit of trickery. And then when it comes back up, it cuts back over at frame 131, right back to what it originally was, squaring up on the stove rather than on the waffle iron. So again, there's quite a bit of trickery that goes into this. It's a little bit sneaky, but I think it works really, really well. And a large part of this was just finding the perfect time to cut. If you do it too early, it's very obvious. If you do it too late, it's very obvious. There's a lot of moving pieces here, so it's all about finding the right point. Now, the reason I didn't want to move the camera, like I said, it would kind of cause some dissonance, but it would also be tough to move the pan and the waffle at the same time. Or waffle iron at the same time, rather. So if you watch this back, the waffle iron actually goes a few frames earlier than the scene. You can see here it cuts in around frame 54, and the rest of the scene doesn't actually shift until frame 69, and that's because as the camera comes back down, we still want to see the waffle iron here. We don't want to jump the gun too soon. So the waffle iron being right here, technically it is on top of the stove, but there are no stove elements to see until frame 68. At the last possible second, it switches out to the counter space. So that's why I did that. It's a little bit of trickery, some smoke and mirrors, but that's a lot of what 3D is. So that's how I accomplished that, and match cuts are really important for this type of work. I think match cuts are one of the most important elements of motion design, and sometimes the match cuts happen on the geometry or in the actual set pieces rather than just in the camera or an editorial. All right, so the second point of interest here is the waffle to pancake, pancake to waffle transition. And in my speech, I actually talk about something called lateral thinking, which I addressed at the very beginning. And that's just sidestepping an issue altogether by finding a laterally related solution. So how this typically works in my mind is a direct problem. You start with your direct problem, which in this case is a pancake needs to turn into a waffle. Now, obviously, that is not really a very helpful thing to Google. It's not a very helpful thing to research. You're not going to find anything that really yields good results. So instead, you need to get more generic with it and try to understand what is actually happening. And what is actually happening is you have simple geometry morphing into complex geometry. And that terminology, that loose terminology, can help you to Google things a little bit better. And once you Google that, you might find all kinds of different solutions for different morphing geometry. For this one in particular, I actually used a shape key. So in order to pull this off, I had to understand fundamentally what it is that I was trying to accomplish. I was trying to get a very simple flat piece of geometry to then have indentions and move in. And so what I ended up Googling for this was just 2 objects morphing in Blender. Now, obviously, I get a lot of different results with finding that, so I was able to kind of suss through a whole bunch of different YouTube videos and find a result that worked for me. Now, this is actually a combination of 2 or 3 different pieces, but I'll show you exactly how I ended up pulling this off. So I'll just solo the pancake here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off some of these so we don't have to worry about that. So if I tab into edit mode here, you'll see the geometry is a little bit interesting. I have all these different cuts, and it actually has the look of a waffle almost. It has these indentions here. And that's because I have a shape key right here where I can just toggle this on. I'll flip to this one, and it automatically flips to a waffle shape. So now I can actually use this slider with a keyframe rather, and I can make it turn into a waffle or a pancake and anything in between. So what I did here, I can just show you a really rough version of what happened. Let's go ahead and I'll create a circle. and I'll just make it have like 16 faces like this. We're just going to do a really rough iteration of what this was. I'll tab it at edit mode, make sure everything's selected, and then I'll go to face up here and do grid fill, and that will just give me a nice little grid. I can then hit I to inset the faces, and we're going to make sure these are set to individual, and then I can kind of push these to like right here. Then we're going to do one more inset, so I'll hit I, and I'll just bring these in just a teeny tiny little bit like that. And I'm just going to leave it for now. So I'm going to tab out of edit mode, and we'll go to the data properties panel right here. It'll be this little green triangle, and we can add a shape key there, and I'll call this shape key pancake. Then we'll add another shape key, and we'll call this shape key waffle. Now under this shape key, we can go ahead and set it to 1. Anything I do to my mesh here, anything I edit, it will be stored in this shape key, and it gives me a float slider from 0 to 1 that you can actually expand both ways to push the extreme values. But it will give me a float slider where I can actually animate in between them. So now if I tab back into edit mode, I already have these faces selected, so I can just hit G and Z and go like this and bring them down. And if I want them to be a little bit smaller to kind of have a scoop in there, I can change my pivot point to individual origins just like that, and I can scale those individual origins just perfectly. So now, if I tab back out of edit mode and go back into object mode, with my object selected here, I can go to my shape keys panel, and I can change this value between 0 and 1, and it's going to morph it from the pancake shape, or this flat piece of geometry, into the waffle shape, which now has the indentions. So again, this is a pretty common approach. I feel like there's nothing particularly crazy about this, nothing particularly insane. But in order to come up with this solution, it required a little bit of thinking outside the box. I had to figure out, what is this like? A good example of this is also in the bow short that I did a few months back. There's a knife that cuts into a log, and as it moves across the log, a piece of shaving comes up. Now, when I started Googling like knife cutting into log, or if I was looking up on YouTube a tutorial to help me figure out how to do that, I wasn't really finding anything particularly helpful in that. So instead I had to use modular thinking to break it down and figure out what are the pieces at play here, what's actually happening, which I did with the WaffleCake again. What am I trying to actually figure out? And then I used lateral thinking to figure out, what is this like? So with the knife and the shaving example, that is like a paper, like a piece of paper rolling up, or like a scroll. And by doing that, I was able to find actually a lot more resources than if I would have just kept Googling, knife cutting into log. Nothing would have come up. And just like that with the WaffleCake transition here, if I just kept getting focused and hung up on it needs to be a pancake turning into a waffle, I might not have found a good solution. I might not have found resources. And if I didn't really even know where to start with this in the first place, I wouldn't really even know what to do. So from there, I would have to pivot. I would have to, clean up my own mess, maybe do a match cut, something else. And it would really erode the end product that I ended up with. All right, for this third point of interest that we're going to go over, it's kind of the bend and twist of the waffle and the pancake, and also the waffle maker. I'll show you that in a second, but that might have slipped under your radar. It's a little bit more subtle, but the most obvious place is as we throw up this pancake here. That sounded really disgusting. Not like vomit throw up. As we toss up the pancake, I really apologize. As we toss up the pancake and it twirls around, it has this really nice bend to it. It feels very organic. It feels very bendy and pliable. And that was done really, really simply. It might seem like a kind of a bit of a grueling operation, but it was quite easy to pull off. Same thing with the squash and stretch here, where it slams down, it kind of expands into the waffle maker a little bit and then contracts back into itself. Same exact procedure, a little bit different variant of it, but same thing. We'll go over that momentarily. And the piece that I thought was a little bit more subtle that you might not have immediately picked up on your first watch is as the waffle iron spins around, it has this kind of cool twist, and it kind of cartoonizes itself and bends in a way that's not necessarily realistic, but lends itself to the kind of the cartoonish nature of its movement. So again, same operation there with a slight twist. So we're going to start just with the pancake here, the waffle cake, and we're going to take a look at how we got the twist and the bend first, and then we'll take a look at everything else. So what I did for this, I started by adding a modifier, a simple deform. You can see that here. And once you add a simple deform, you actually get a few different options here. You get the twist, bend, taper, and stretch. Now you can see I have another one that's set to stretch, but we'll get to that momentarily. So when you set it to twist, you get the ability to twist it around on itself like this. Let me zoom in here so you can actually see what's going on. You get the option to kind of twist it in on itself like this, and you can actually change the axis as well. And something really cool that we'll get to later on in this demonstration, we will also take a look at setting the origin, which will allow you to twist it from a specific place. So it really is as simple as that. It's a simple deform modifier set to twist with just changing the angle. And then as you can see here, the angle is just animated on 2s to kind of match the speed of everything. So very simple, very easy to do, and just adds a little bit more life. Now, similarly, we have our simple deform set to stretch. That's actually on top of it in the modifier hierarchy, and we can watch what happens when it comes down. It gets a keyframe here, and it's set to -0.002, and then as it slams down, it pushes out. Now, why this is really cool, as opposed to using something like a shape key to do this, it will maintain its volume. So as it slams down here, it pushes out just a tiny bit, and then retracts into itself like that, causing a little bit of squash and stretch. Again, it's nothing dramatic, it's nothing crazy, but if you watch it back, it really does add a little bit of oomph and give the waffle a more organic feel, which is very important. So now let's take a look at how we used the simple deform twist in a slightly different way. For the waffle iron, I wanted it to twist both from the axis of the actual hinge where it's spinning around, but I also wanted the whole thing to twist. And rather than trying to control each and every object and have a different deform modifier on there, what I did was I created a lattice. Now, if you're not familiar, a lattice is essentially just a cage. If you're a cinema person, you might be familiar with like an FFD. It's essentially a mesh cage that allows you to change the general composure or proportions of your mesh. Anything that's bound inside the cage, it will change that. Now, this is really great. You can combine this with shape keys, and you can get some really wonky, cool behaviors from that. But this is also really cool because you can add modifiers to the cage itself, to the lattice. And so in this instance, I added a simple deform, just like how I did with the WaffleCake. I added a simple deform here, set to twist, and then I changed the origin to this little guy right here, which is actually where it spins from. And so now when we have the lattice selected here, when it twists, I'll chase it across the screen. When it twists from this point rather than twisting from the center, which is what you would do by default. So it twists from this origin point set to the very back, and so it twists as though it's being motivated by the spinning of the hinge, and then everything just takes a second to catch up, making it feel very cartoonish in nature. And I really like the way that ended up looking. And as you can see, the lattice actually controls all the different pieces. Even though these are all individual pieces of a mesh, you don't have to combine them and then add something in, or add a whole bunch of simple deforms in and control them all at once. You can just put a lattice there and control the lattice with a twist deform, and then link everything to that cage, and it will affect the entire thing like it's one mesh. For our fourth and final point of interest here, we're going to go over lighting. Now, lighting is something that I really struggled to teach. I don't really care to teach it very often, but it is something I consistently am asked to go over. It's something anytime I put out a poll or kind of just ask people, hey, what should I talk about? It's almost always lighting. A few people consider it to be a strength of mine. I'm not a technical animator, and really my lighting setup is usually just vibe based. It's kind of whatever feels right or looks right to me, which is kind of what I'm saying is so much of my workflow is just taste and being able to decipher between what works, what doesn't work, and then kind of figuring out why it doesn't work or why it does work. Now, in my members only breakdown video, which if you're not subscribed to members only, please do that. If you want to join a community, if you want to join the fort, if you want to get access to me as your friend, or if you just want to get a more comprehensive breakdown, far more comprehensive than this breakdown, check that out today. You can do that from my YouTube channel. When you go to my main page, you can subscribe there. Whatever. But something I talk about in that breakdown is my reluctancy to teach lighting and how difficult it actually is. I think you can teach 3-point lighting pretty easily. That's a very good, hard skill that's like, it almost always works if in a pinch. I think that you can teach the fundamentals of how to think about lighting. I think you can teach the technical components of lighting, but really you don't become a decent lighting artist until you actually get in the trenches, make some mistakes, get bullied a little bit for having poor lighting, and just kind of figure out your tastes and what works and what doesn't work, and just kind of figure out the whole puzzle of lighting, because that's exactly what it is. It's a puzzle. So figuring all of that out is something that just takes time and takes some effort, but nevertheless, I'm going to include my lighting setup. Again, I'm not a technical artist. I'm not a technical lighter. So everything I do is completely based on, do I think it's going to look good? And if it doesn't, I just kind of adjust it and tweak it. So there might be lighting artists watching this video. There might be technical artists that say, that's a horrible way to do that. There's a better way. If so, let me know. Let me know in the comments if there's a better way. I'm not claiming to be the expert. I just happen to be a guy who made a pretty picture, and I'm showing you how I made that pretty picture. So let's get into the lighting, okay? The first thing I do is I start with an HDRI. Now, I like to get my HDRIs from Grayscale Gorilla. They have really great ones, and it's just a like click and send solution. But as you can see here, we just have some nice soft lighting that gives a little bit of ambient to it. It makes it feel like it's existing in a world. There's nothing dynamic about it. There's nothing particularly dramatic. You have dark still. You have softer lights, and it's just something to give a little bit of ambient light. That's a good starting spot. So that's usually where I start there. From there, I like to actually add in some rim lights to just kind of offset things. So I added a rim light here that gives me a nice shine on my pan. And then if I go forward to the waffle iron, it gives me a little bit of a shine on the waffle iron as well. And you'll notice the lights actually, the rim lights stay the same. When I have this camera move, or the scene move rather, the camera trickery, the lights don't move with it unless it's an environment light, which we'll get into momentarily. So then I added another rim light, which is actually up here, so that when the pancake, the waffle cake, goes into the air, it kind of backlights it there. So from there, I actually added a gobo. You would think you would go to the key light next, or maybe even the fill light, but the gobo I knew was going to be very important to keeping the scene structurally intact, where your eye was pulled to the right spot. And I also knew it was going to be an important element to keep the scene feeling very warm and like a lived-in kitchen. So I added a area light, and then I added a gobo to it. I made it plenty warm. You can see here it is right here, this giant piece here, and it's just blasted right here against the wall with, again, a Grayscale Gorilla gobo texture on there. So that helped to kind of populate the scene with a little bit more lighting. It made it feel a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more dramatic. But now I needed to add in a key light to kind of help fill in some of the dark spaces here up in the foreground. So that's exactly what I did. As you can see, it just kind of lights it a little bit better, and it feels a little bit more even, and the darker spots in the foreground kind of disappear. And I did the same kind of thing. I added in a fill light here, so then as the pancake goes up into the air, there's still a little bit of light being boosted mid-air for it there. So now we actually get into the ambient lights, and this is what I actually added in to kind of help make the background feel a little bit more lively, to fill out some of the dark spots back there. And with this, I'm going to actually start by turning off all my lights so I can just see exactly what I'm doing back here. Now, I had my backlights, as you can see right here. Where is it? There it is. As you can see right here, I have this kitchen cabinet in the background, and oftentimes these kitchen cabinets have under lights to kind of backlight everything. So I wanted to add those in right there. So I'll turn these on for you here, and just added 3 of these lights to give a little bit of filling to this dark space back here, but just to also make it feel like an actual kitchen. And from there, I added in my last 2 lights, which would be my environment lights. And I added one here to light up the cabinets and kind of glint off the floor a little bit. And I'll turn all these back on so you can get the full picture. And as I scroll forward here, you can see the ceiling is still very dark. So that's where I added a second environment light to illuminate that a little bit. So all of the lighting here, this is more lights than I typically use. Typically, I try to keep it to just a few, unless it's a particularly complicated scene like this where you have kind of some depth and not everything is highlighted very obviously. But I do try to keep it very simple. You know, this is not maybe the most perfect lighting setup. It's maybe not even, technically correct. It might not even be physically, correct for what it would be in photoreal. But it made a pretty picture. It created a pretty picture, and that's all I needed. That's all I needed out of this, was to look nice, and that's exactly what we got. So that's a breakdown of my lighting. Not, like I said, not the most comprehensive, not the best, but it's what I do. And I think that's going to about do it for our breakdown. Creative problem solving isn't necessarily about finding the exact specific right key to go into the exact specific right door. It's actually far more heavy-handed than that. Oftentimes, it's about looking for the heaviest object in the room to actually help you bash in the door. It's all about perseverance and letting your own idea take priority over your own trepidation. Now, the half-res video, the presentation I did, it should be available at some point to view, so I'll keep you updated when that drops. If you're new here, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. You can follow me on Instagram where I post full projects, BTS, announcements, all that kind of stuff. Your support with this channel and with my Instagram really helps it grow and to just push the content out to folks. And if you want to see more in-depth breakdowns, if you want to talk to me face-to-face, ask me questions, cut it up together, consider joining members only here on YouTube. It'll be linked down below. I appreciate you so much for being here. Thanks for watching.